I became a Christian because Christianity is unequivocally and undeniably true. It is so true that even if Christianity were not true, it would be better to live as a Christian than not as a Christian. I'm here today at Bob Jones Park, and I wanted to talk to everybody out there a little bit about why I'm a Christian. And in order to do that, I wanted to just kind of tell you a little bit about me and my story and kind of how I got to where I am. This is a nice place for me here. This is a walking trail that gets you out to Lake Grapevine. And I like to come out here and just think about things and talk to myself and contemplate kind of what life has for me and for everybody else out there. My story kind of begins as a little boy. I was born in New Jersey, and my mother and father had a trucking company. And this trucking company, during the oil embargo in the 1970s, essentially went belly up. My father got into a bad way with some worse people, and we ended up putting everything together and moving out to California. We got to California, we moved to Sylmar. This was 1983, somewhere around that time. And I'll have to say at that point, Sylmar was not the best place in the world to live. We lived a few doors down from a crack house, which was not the best experience as a little boy. Both my parents were flawed people. My mother was a bipolar, drug-addicted alcoholic, and my father was a very angry man sometimes. That's not to say they weren't loving parents. They were flawed people, just like everybody's a flawed person. I could really tell you two stories about my upbringing. I could tell you the story of this little boy who grew up with this drug-addicted alcoholic bipolar mother and this aggressive, angry father that were constantly fighting and had multiple relationships and multiple children with various people. And that would be true. I could also tell you the story of being a little boy who grew up in a home where both his parents loved him very much and worked hard to support him and had food on the table and a roof over his head and did everything they could to support him and help him reach his dreams and his goals. And that would be true as well. So by the time I was roughly 10 years old, we had moved, I think about 11 times at that point. We had gone all over California, and we ended up in this town called Hesperia, California. When we moved to Hesperia, life changed a bit. We had some stability. We had bought a little house, and I was able to live there from about the age of 7 to 17. When my parents moved out to California, I remember asking my dad, how did he do it? You have to understand something. My dad was a very smart man, and he was also a very aggressive person. And I think one of the challenges he had in his life is he never really knew what he wanted to do. So when he got to California, he had lost everything. He had this new wife, and he had this little 2-year-old boy. No job, no money, no income, nothing coming in. He went out and he hand wrote 50 resumes, and he started sending them out to companies all over California to try to find a job. And I remember asking him at one point, with the pressure of that, how did you do it? And my dad, being the man that he was, just smiled and said he knew he could. And that always stuck with me. That was something that was really important. So growing up, my family was not Christian. We never went to church. We never talked about anything revolving around God or spirituality or anything of that nature. The only thing I knew about Christianity was if the Christians I knew were true Christians, I wanted nothing to do with it. I remember one time when I was right around 11 years old, my parents and I, or my dad and I actually, went to a church and we prayed for my brother, who was older and lived in New York at the time, to make the NHL. We walked into a church and we saw these people with their hands raised all over the place. And my dad and I just kind of looked at each other and kind of smirked and laughed and left. And that was my experience with church growing up. My parents, for all their flaws, were very generous people. Where I grew up in Hesperia was truly the Wild West. We got to keep in mind that Hesperia in the 1980s, there was a town where, the 3 things to do were to get pregnant, do drugs, or play sports. Those were pretty much your options at that point. So the direction I went was to play sports. I played soccer, I played basketball, I played baseball, and I played football. Those were the sports I played. And I ended up having a tremendous amount of skill in baseball and became a very accomplished baseball player. Baseball was really my life and my way out. I had 3 very good friends growing up. 2 of them are still very good friends of mine to this day. The third one tragically passed away at way too young of an age last year. All of us centered around baseball. We played together. We were together all the time. And we always knew we came from similar stories. We had similar backgrounds, similar type of families, similar types of problems. And baseball was our refuge. Baseball was the way we got away and got out of it. We always knew as little boys and men growing up that if we wanted anything in this world, we were going to have to earn it, and we were going to have to fight for it, and nobody was going to hand us anything. So that is something we rallied around, and because of that, we were able to banter with each other and push each other to levels that we didn't think were possible. And I'm very grateful for those opportunities and those times together with Justin and Brian especially. God had graced me with certain skill sets. From a young age, people seemed to listen to me. They seemed to come to me for answers to questions. They came to me for advice. I guess it was just something I was born with. I don't know what it was, but even I remember as a little boy, 4 or 5 years old, other kids from the neighborhood coming to me and asking me for help on things that I really didn't know anything about, but I did my best to help them and do things for them. And this carried over. I became not only a very, very good prospect in baseball, I was a left-handed pitcher, and at one point, Upper Deck had me ranked as one of the top 10 prospects in the state of California after my freshman year of high school. I was consistently a very popular kid in school. I had lots of friends. I was a leader in student government. I was a team captain, had multiple championships, was at all the parties, all that stuff growing up. So from the outside, I had everything. I had status and girls and athletics and everything a young man probably wanted, other than maybe money. But other than that, things looked pretty good. Well, that was like my parents, one side of the story. The other side is I was pretty introverted, and going out and going to these parties and being around people was fun, and I enjoyed it, but I found it to be very draining. I would get home and feel exhausted by the mental strain of interacting and dealing with people on a day-to-day basis. Not that I didn't love people or enjoy their company. It just wasn't something that gave me energy. It wasn't something that drove me. It actually felt like it took from me. These are things that continue to this day. But I kept on pressing and moving forward, even though at this point in my life, I was drunk, was incredibly shy in a lot of ways, even though I was very popular and seemed to have kind of everything a young man would want, good grades and everything else. Well, this continued to manifest itself, and when I was 17, something kind of radically changed in our life. We had, as I said, purchased a home when I was about 7 years old, and this is the house I ended up growing up in. We got a knock on the door one day, and the ex-wife of the gentleman who we purchased the home from had come up and knocked on the door and informed us that her husband had died, and that the house that my parents had purchased was not really our house. We had just been renting it for the last 10 years, and it was now time for us to go. My father had purchased the house from this gentleman on a handshake, and when he purchased the house, he had paid off his second mortgage and was paying off the first for 10 to 15 years. He went and spoke to an attorney. When he spoke to the attorney informed him that he could fight this and he would win. That's the good thing. The bad thing was that the cost of doing this lawsuit would be more than the house was worth. So at 17, we had lost our family home, and my dad had suffered some numerous health issues, including a 6-vessel bypass heart attack, and things were not looking so great for my family. For me personally, things were not going so well either. When I was 15 years old, I tore my rotator cuff, and if you know anything about baseball, you understand that, especially in this time. This was 1994. Tearing a rotator cuff as a left-handed pitcher is not a good thing. So I was advised by doctors to sit out an entire year, which I didn't do. I ended up playing, but just not pitching the next year. And at the end of the day, I never really recovered from that. I went from being a very elite player to being just another good player. And I continued to play through high school and played in college, but I was never really able to capture that opportunity back. My whole life was baseball. It was what I wanted to do. It was what defined me. It was how I spent all my time. I would play football at Sultana High School, and on weekends I would play 2 doubleheaders. All I did was play baseball. All I wanted to do was play baseball. My whole life was baseball, and I just assumed that moving forward, my entire life would be around baseball. If I couldn't play it, I would coach it. If I couldn't coach it, I would work in a front office somewhere, and if nobody would let me do that, I would clean the fields. That's how much I loved it. But it's strange how life has turning of events. I remember thinking to myself when we lost our home that, man, if I could help people not face this type of situation, because the situation could have been fixed with some very basic planning. If I can't do baseball, I want to do something that's going to help people not have to go through what my family's going through. And that thought kind of stuck with me as my career continued to unfold. Everything came to a head in around 2000. I was a junior, and I was playing baseball at the University of California, Riverside. I was brought into the coach's office because I was really not able to pitch anymore because of my shoulder, and they informed me that they no longer required me as a first baseman, but they did want me to stay on and pitch again. They wanted me to work with a pitching coach and stay on the team as a left-handed pitcher. Now, this is where God kind of steps in and does some very interesting things in your life. I had spent that entire summer training and rehabbing from a hip injury that I had. I had spent months and months and months working out 6-7 hours a day, training and coaching and doing everything I could to get ready for this upcoming season, because as a junior in college, if you want to play professionally, your junior year is basically your make or break year. But at this moment, talking to the coach, 99 out of 100 times, I would have said, absolutely, sir. I'll do whatever you need me to do and whatever the team requires of me. If you want me to pitch, I'll pitch. If you want me to be a cheerleader, I'll be a cheerleader. Whatever you need. This day, though, I said thank you, but no thank you. And I decided that my baseball career was now over. Now, this wasn't just a baseball career for me. It was a life career. My life was finished with this endeavor, and the sense of who I was as a human being had been changed forever. I found myself now going down this long road of uncertainty, not knowing where I was headed or what I was going to do. Luckily, I had a very good friend who, after high school, had moved up to Las Vegas, Nevada, and was doing very well in his career and had just purchased a home. So I called him up, one of my childhood friends, Justin, and told him that I was going to transfer to the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and if I could run a room from him, which he was happy to do. So I packed up everything in a little truck and had $100 in my pocket and drove up to Las Vegas to start my new life. Now, I'd like to tell you that I went to Las Vegas with the best of intentions, but to be quite honest with you, what I wanted to do in Las Vegas was essentially to party and get with as many women as I could. I didn't really have a plan as far as what life looked like. I just knew that something had to change. You see, I had gone up to Las Vegas the summer before to train. I figured that if I could stay disciplined in a city like Las Vegas and do everything I needed to do, that I could really do anything. And I did. I wasn't out doing anything I shouldn't have been doing at that point. I was very dedicated. Ironically, when I moved back up to Las Vegas, I didn't know where to go or know anybody. So I ended up going back to the same gym that I went to train in the summer. Now, at this time, I'd been there for about 2 weeks, and my plan was to just party and have fun the entire time I was there and finish school and then figure out what to do. My father, growing up, had instilled a deep love of history in me. So I studied economic history and planned to get out of school as fast as I could and go out and figure out what life looked like. I started training again just to stay in shape, and I went back to this gym about 2 weeks after I moved to Las Vegas. And I met this young lady at the counter who was beautiful and bubbly and friendly. And I said hi and she said hello. And this later became my wife. Now, the interesting thing about this is, had I never stopped playing baseball, I never would have moved back to Las Vegas. I never would have met her. And this is how God can kind of change your life when you think that everything is falling apart. Lene and I pretty much instantly became attached at the hip. We had been dating for a few weeks, but we pretty much spent every minute together. And the relationship was, in my opinion, great. Even though I was not the best and continue not to be the best mate, I can be very driven and very direct and not so subtle sometimes. And that causes problems in marriages and relationships. And it's something that I'm working on. So at some point, if you choose to work with me in some capacity, I apologize in advance for my demeanor. It's not that I don't care, it's that I care too much. And as I said, relationships can be a bit draining on me. And this has caused struggles with not only my marriage, but with my relationship with friends and family. I'm working on it and trying to be better. My future wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, was a Christian. And I remember us having conversations about Christianity. I would ask her questions like, so wait, you believe in the virgin birth? And she would, of course, say yes. And I would say, so wait a minute, what makes more sense to you? You have this 15-year-old Jewish girl in the first century Judea who has an affair and knows that if she's found out, she's going to be killed and stoned to death. So you make up a story and you say that I had this immaculate conception. Doesn't that make more sense? And I would have questions like this that nobody could ever answer. Nobody could ever give me, in my opinion, what an adequate answer was. So as though she remained in her faith, I did not remain in any faith. I was really an atheist agnostic at this point. I always believed there was some sort of higher power out there. I never thought atheism and naturalism made any sense. You could look at the design of the world and see that was obvious. But I didn't think that contemplating whoever created all of this was something that human beings could ever really comprehend. So things went on like this for about 10 years. During this time, my career had flourished. I became a prominent financial planning advisor and started businesses. I became a millionaire by the time I was 27. I owned millions of dollars of real estate. And I thought I had built the perfect recession-proof business. I had an investment company that was also a mortgage broker and a real estate broker. We would be a one-stop shop for investors to come in to do their stocks and bonds and real estate and lending needs and take care of everything. I figured if interest rates rose and bond prices fell, then we could just switch gears and we could focus on other products that would help people navigate those storms. Therefore, the recession-proof business. Lo and behold, that all changed in 2008 with the Great Recession when everything collapsed. including my wealth in my business. So there I was, 28 years old and starting over. My wife, to her credit at this point, because we were married at this time, was very supportive. I had put her into some bad economic situations that I didn't quite realize at the time, but we were able to recoup and get out of it. It took me about 5 years to kind of get everything back together and restart the business and get things going. During this time, I changed my business model and focused more on asset protection. As I said, going back to losing my home, I wanted to create a business that helped protect families and put them in situations where they didn't have to deal with the things that I dealt with growing up. So it was right around 2011 when I had a client who had a pension plan. It was a business with a pension plan, and they needed to go in front of the IRS to defend a Department of Labor claim. There were 2 people in the entire state of Nevada who had experience in this. Both were mathematicians and actuaries. So I called this gentleman out of the phone book and told him the situation, because he was a pension expert and an actuary and a mathematician, and just asked him to meet at his office. So I go down and meet this gentleman at his office, and he was a Christian, and he was not only a Christian, but he was a Bible-believing, true creationist Christian. He believed the Bible cover to cover. He was the first man that I met that, as soon as we sat down, he asked me what I think about God, what did I think about religion, and I gave him my opinions, and he was the first one who actually was able to defend his faith and could actually give me reasons for why Christianity might be true. Now, when I met this guy, I knew he was smart. His name was Rich, and he was very smart, and he's still one of my better friends to this day. Now, this guy was very well read and very smart, as I said, but he had some crazy views. He believed the Bible cover to cover. He thought that humans walked with dinosaurs and that the world was 6,000 years old, and on and on and on. But the difference was, when I spoke to him, he could actually give me reasons why that actually might be correct. So although I wasn't a Christian at this point, it was the first time in my life where I actually met somebody who could defend the reason for Christianity and give me some actual valid whys as to why it might actually be something to look into. Turns out that God was working on my heart through this whole time. He started bringing people into my life and events into my life that helped to bring down some of those walls that I had built up, these intellectual crutches that I had laid on. You see, I always thought that I was this independent thinker and that Christianity was this crutch that people needed to be able to deal with the harsh realities of life. And I was so much more evolved and smarter than everybody else because I didn't need that, because I was so strong. Sometimes you can think foolish things when you're young. It was around this time that the movie The Passion of the Christ had first played on television. I had never seen the movie before, had no interest in seeing it, didn't know anything about Jesus, didn't know anything about Christianity really, other than this new friend of mine. But to my wife's encouragement, we started watching the movie. And as I told her, I said, listen, Lene, if you're a Christian, that's great, but I'll never be a Christian. You'll never convert me to Christianity. Never gonna happen. But regardless, we decided to watch this movie as it came out on TV because it had been such a huge hit. And I remember sitting there, this was 2011, and as the movie played out and finished, I remember sobbing like a little boy at the end of it, crying almost uncontrollably and having no idea why I was crying. I didn't know anything about this person. I didn't even know if this person actually ever existed. Why was I having such an emotional response to this movie? Was it just because it was a good movie? Was there something more there? These are questions I had no idea I could answer or could ever be answered. During this time also, there was a documentary that my wife showed me. It was called The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. And I remember watching that video and turning to my wife and saying, wow, that actually makes sense. And I was surprised that there were actually Christians out there who could talk logically and reasonably about why Christianity might actually be true and not some crutch that people needed to get through life. There were other strange events that started to happen. I remember waking up about 3 o'clock in the morning, and there was a TV show on our television set, and it was a show about Christianity. There was a professor on, a Dr. Eric Stoner, who was a statistician at the University of Houston. He had run a statistical analysis of the prophecies in the Old Testament and concluded that there were roughly 325 prophecies of the Messiah in the Old Testament. If you just took 8 of them, things that couldn't be controlled, like where the Messiah would be born and how he would die, things that were completely out of the control of a human being, there was only one person in history that actually met these criteria. And the statistical chances of one person fulfilling just 8 of these prophecies was 1 in 10 to the 17th power. Now, to give you an idea, since I live in Texas, that would be the equivalent of taking silver dollars, filling the entire state of Texas 2 feet deep in silver dollars, putting an X on one of them, blindfolding yourself, turning yourself around. You would have a better chance of picking out that silver dollar than any other person, being Jesus, the Messiah. So that was interesting. Did I mention my name? So my last name is DePasquale. The name DePasquale is Italian for the Passover, Pascha, Passover, or Easter. I find this very ironic because this is where the story turns for the better. On Easter weekend of 2011, I was picking up some books on business. I went to a a local Barnes & Noble in Henderson, Nevada. And I'm walking down, I was picking up Sun Tzu's Art of War as a book on business politics. As I'm walking through the store, I get this little voice in my head, and to this day, I don't know where it came from, but it said, turn down this aisle and pick up this book. So I walk down the aisle and I pick up this book, and it was The Great Works by C.S. Lewis. It was all his apologetics works, which I had never heard of C.S. Lewis before, and I didn't know anything about him. I didn't even know about the Chronicles of Narnia or anything. I've never heard of him before. So regardless, I decided to listen to the voice in my head and picked up this book. So I picked up these books and I decided to go home and read them. As I said, it was Easter weekend 2011. I started to read Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis as he laid out a logical, consistent view of Christianity. And something strange happened. It was like the book was written just for me. As I got through the chapters, I would read and I'd hear this claim and his response to the claim. And I would think to myself, well, that can't be right because of XYZ. I would turn the page and C.S. Lewis would say, you're probably thinking right now XYZ, but here's why you're wrong. And here's why this is accurate. And as I got through that book, I realized very clearly that the logic and reason in the book was infallible. It was not something that was deniable. It was truth. What do you do with that? You have this whole belief your entire life that you're so right about something, the most important thing, and you find out that you're a fool. I don't think a lot of people think about that and can deal with that and can handle that. And it was hard for me too to do that. C.S. Lewis himself was a brilliant scholar, was a World War I veteran, had been seen terrible action in World War I, and was an ardent atheist. As he said, he was the most reluctant convert in all of England. And I felt something similar as I got on my knees and begged God for forgiveness for the person that I am. I didn't really realize at the time what Christianity actually was, but I remember saying to myself, Lord, if you're real, show yourself to me and I will become a great warrior for you. Ironically, God chose to come and get me on Easter weekend. You know, it's funny, God does have an interesting sense of humor. You save somebody with the last name of Easter on Easter, but nonetheless, that was my story to becoming a Christian. Once I became a Christian, I decided to really dive into the Bible. I had never read the Bible before. I remember I had one Bible study. I got kicked out of high school for fighting as a freshman, and my parents threw me into Asperia Christian School for about 2 weeks, and I remember going to a Bible study class, and they told me to open up to John chapter 4. I had no idea what John was. I had no idea what chapter 4 was or what verse it was. I just opened the book and started praying to this God that didn't exist to have the teacher not call on me because I had no idea what the heck they were talking about. So I came into reading the Bible with the idea that what this book says is correct, and if there's something that I disagree with, it's me with the problem, not the book. So as I read through the Bible for the first time, a lot of the things that I had heard about Christianity just wasn't true. It was a very strange experience, and I decided to start absorbing as much information as I possibly could, so I got very into Christian apologetics. I would listen and read books from gentlemen like Francis Schaeffer and all of C.S. Lewis's works, and Greg Banson, and William Lane Craig, and Chuck Missler, and Gary Habermas, and Rabbi Zacharias, and on and on and on and on. I kept finding that the deeper I tried to dig through Christianity, I just didn't have a big enough shovel. The Christian religion and the faith, it's exceptionally intellectually deep, and the values that Christianity has instilled not only on our nation, but on humanity as a whole are a great heritage and a wonderful thing. Unfortunately, today, a lot of that is skewed and not recognized for the contributions it has had to the value and worth of humanity as a whole. I want to make one thing clear here. I didn't become a Christian because it's a crutch. I didn't become a Christian because my wife was a Christian and I wanted to have a better relationship with her. I didn't become a Christian to increase my profitability as a business owner and to network. I became a Christian because Christianity is unequivocally and undeniably true. It is so true that even if Christianity were not true, it would be better to live as a Christian than not as a Christian. Let me explain. C.S. Lewis once said that he believes in Christianity as he believes the sun is rising, not because he sees the sun rising, but by it he sees everything else. And that is very true for Christianity. The world would have you believe today that everything exploded from nothing, that this whole world is just some sort of cosmic accident, and that us as human beings have no real value in the universe. And if you think about it from that perspective, it would be kind of true. You know, we're on this cosmic speck in the middle of this vast universe, and on this cosmic speck there are all these people running around that do terrible things to each other on a daily basis and hurt each other and fight. What could the universe possibly care about us or being here? The challenge with this thinking is that it's false. You have people every day that you meet that will say something like, hey, don't cut me off in line, don't yell at me, don't be mean to me, don't be rude to me, whatever it might be. But in order to have that standard of this is right or wrong, there has to be some meaning to right and wrong. And if we're all just this cosmic accident that is some odd, weird reality that just happened to form from absolutely nothing, then there would be no real sense of right and wrong. There would be no real sense of being correct or incorrect. Things would just be. And this is a very dangerous way of thinking and has had major impact on our society and major impact on our reality, especially as we find ourselves as a country and as a world today. The problem is that if everything actually did come from nothing and the world really has no meaning, then abstract concepts like universal laws such as the laws of mathematics, the laws of logic, cannot be trusted. Because if you're using this mind of yours that came about by accident, that has no real purpose behind it, that wasn't designed, that just came to be, and there's no process behind it or information coming into it that makes it make sense, how can you trust the logic you're using to come to your conclusions? How can you trust the mathematics that you're using to frame the world as you see it? It would be impossible. You have no frame of reference for any of these things. You have no true right or wrong. You have no true value to saying this is correct versus this is not correct. You have no basis for morals or ethics. The morals or mores, the what is. It is what it is, the way things are, versus the ethics, the what ought. This is the way things should be. Who's to say which one's correct or which one isn't? The funny thing is the second you say this is or this isn't, you become a hypocrite, because you are now in a position where you are just giving your preference as opposed to something that's actually real. It's my preference that people love each other and you love your neighbor as opposed to eating them. It's my preference that I am kind to somebody as opposed to enslaving them. It is my preference that women should be loved and respected as opposed to enslaved. If you don't have a center or a foundation, you have no basis for any type of law or rule or preference you want. It just becomes a preference. And that is a lot of what we're going to be discovering through this channel and the road I'm going to take you down as we move forward, not only in business and in finance, but also in spirituality. I will talk more about this type of thing in later videos, and I'll try to give you my best examples of why Christianity is true, why I'm a Christian, and why you should be too. I have to tell you, Christianity is the best deal you're ever going to find in your entire life. If you're looking for value, you cannot beat being a child of God, being an inheritor of all things that are created, having unlimited wealth, receiving eternal life, and forever being young for absolutely free, for doing nothing more than just saying, I want to be part of your family. I think that is the best deal you're ever going to find. But we will explore that as we get forward. As for me, I face new challenges. I have 4 beautiful young children who I love very, very much. We're in a new place with a new business and a new adventure. So stay tuned to learn more about that journey if you're so inclined, as this is going to be a new process for all of us. I hope you enjoyed this content, and I'll talk to you real soon. Thanks for listening.